Can you get in the frame? Mm-hmm. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Two Rivers Bookstore and Weird Sisters Yarn. And we actually have the perfect event for our store. We have author Stephany Wilkes here. She's written a book called Raw Material, and it's mainly her experience as a sheep shearer in the United States. And we also have
Brooke Sinnes. Oh, Brooke's holding up the Raw Material book. She's a natural dyer of sincere sheep yarns. And we are Two Rivers Bookstore and Weird Sisters Yarn Shop here in Portland, Oregon. Stephany and Brooke are in California. We've got a deep Northern California connection, and so we're pretty excited to talk to them today. Just quick PSA about what we have going on at the shop here. Next Saturday, we have an Earth, Wind, and Fire open air craft fair. We're in phase 1 in Multnomah County. And so we'll be featuring local artists vending in an open air craft fair that use crafts focused on natural materials and native natural elements. And was there anything else that we have going on?
Probably. You can check our website.
This is new for us. So we're just kind of testing this out. If you have any technical issues, feel free to write something in the chat down along the bottom of your screen. You'll see a little chat section. There's also an ask a question. Feel free to ask any questions as they come. We'll be monitoring them, and then we'll have a question and answer section at the end, and we'll help field those questions to Stephany and Brooke. So you don't want to hear us talk anymore, so we'll let Stephany and Brooke talk. Thanks.
Hey, everybody.
No, I did it wrong. Hold on. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's technology. What, you don't control all the software all the time? It's crazy.
No.
Hi.
Okay. Hold on. I should be able to invite her on screen. Ah! Jen, how do I fix this?
I think this is like the technology equivalent of the first pancake. You know how the first pancake always has to look terrible? It's like the first few minutes of any live event online now. You just have to work out all the little bumps. It's all good.
We're going to have Stephany talk about her book, and we'll figure out how to get you both in side by side.
Okay.
Perfect.
Can you see? You want me to talk about my book? First, no author wants to talk about their book. Like, that's why we wrote it, so we didn't have to talk about it.
I can talk about it with you. I loved it. The opening chapter where you were talking about your battle with the sheep. I mean, I was crying with you in the truck. It is so, your writing is really great and powerful. It's super awesome. Do you want to, like, how you in the credits, you attribute the book to a few different people, like getting it out there. You had some cheerleaders.
I had a lot of cheerleaders. But I feel like I don't trust people who have a short acknowledgement section, you know? There's a tremendous amount of people help get the book out. And I think most generously was every person I work with who agreed to let me tell their story, which is super scary. So, when I started writing the book, I think I said this before, my personal story was not in the first draft at all. It was just basically one chapter about each person and their work. So one chapter about Robin Lind and her Jacob sheep. One chapter about Marie and her Wesson sheep and grazing. And people were like, who is this person and why is she on this farm? I have to know, like, who is this narrator, this omniscient narrator? And then I thought shearing kind of became the through line, because that is literally what brings me to the properties, is doing work. But the fact that folks, were willing to read my drafts, and as a non-farmer, we're always talking about appropriation, but I think it applies to labor and to agriculture as well, is that I don't have a farm and I don't have animals. So I wanted to be super careful about seeming to speak for a community that I work in, but that I can't say I'm really a part of as to the same degree. You know, I'm not doing animal husbandry day in and day out. And so that's, I think the greatest generosity was on the part of my subjects, for sure.
Okay, I think I have the directions on how to get you both up. So if you don't mind, we're just gonna redo a little focusing here. So unfocus Stephany, and then turn off the video. Ha! Thanks, Jen. Okay.
Hooray.
And then Brooke, maybe you want to talk a little bit about why you dye sheep and what's your connection to the wool.
Oh gosh. I know. We have, how long do we have? So basically, Sincere Sheep was born out of a desire to help small family farms and mills here in the US. Basically, when I started my company, wool prices were super low. Like farmers were getting paid 10, 20 cents a pound. And you have to shear a sheep. Like it's cruel not to. So that is an expense that every farmer has to incur at least once a year. Some farmers shear more than once, depending on the type of breed of sheep they have. But so when I found out about that, I thought, well, gosh, that's ridiculous that they're earning so little per pound. And what was happening sort of outside of that was that the slow food movement was really happening. And I had recently moved up to the Napa Valley, which is where I live now. And so vintners were taking advantage of this real interest to create single vineyard wines. And I don't know, I was like, you can do the exact same thing with fiber. And even with dyes, like each year, the wool changes because since you're shearing it every year, the fleece is a record of the ewes year. And so every year is going to be slightly different. And as they age, the wool changes and may change in color if it's a colored fleece. And to me, that had a lot of value. And so that's basically where I got started, was out of a desire to be able to buy wool at a much higher price than what farmers were getting. And I started locally. And actually, I was buying from a woman who was a sheep shearer in Sonoma she did backyard, what we call lawnmower sheep. So, people who had, 2 or 3 sheep that would take care of grazing like a half acre or an acre of land that people had their houses on, and they just needed to keep the weeds down for fire suppression. And she would also do like small family flocks. And so she was kind of one of the ways that I got introduced into some of these different local farms. And, sometimes she would just trade, if it was a really nice fleece, she would trade for that fleece. But then you could only do that so much until you have way too much fleece. So then I would buy some of that fleece off of her. So that's kind of how I got started. And then I wanted to I knew that, we had some local, mills and some mills here in the US that were still existing. And so I wanted to, continue to support them. And then the natural dyeing piece came out of that was actually the person that I was learning to hand spin from was a natural dyer. And so, I really that was where my interest was. And plus it fit in with kind of the ethos of what I was already doing, in that, even if you're buying natural dyes internationally, which some natural dyers do, some don't. In my case, I do. They still are raised by farmers, whereas synthetic dyes, which are what acid dyes are made by companies like Bayer. And, that's fine. That's, it's a chemical company and they're making synthetic dyes. But, we have this opportunity through natural dyes to be able to support farmers, whether they're here in the United States or abroad. And so to me, that all was kind of really in alignment. And so that's how that was sort of the basis of my business. and I've been in business now, I think around 17 years. So I'm clearly still enjoying it because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, that is awesome. I have a friend who is very involved in the food farm to table movement in Sacramento and Katy Valley. Mm-hmm. And I went to a sheep to shear event. It was so fun. And I, at the time, had a brand new puppy a Pyrenees, Great Pyrenees. He saw the shearing pile, made a dye for it, and was the happiest. It was so happy for him. I was like, all right, genetics. But enough about me.
I don't know. I had a Chihuahua who absolutely loved like just burrowing into wool. And so he, and they are not used in sheep herding at all. So it just, it smells good and it's awesome. So your dog had fabulous taste. I don't blame it at all. Was it Full Belly Farms by any chance that you went to where you went to the event?
I think it was
because they're one of the.
It was the Grange for one of the Granges out there in the middle of nowhere.
Oh,
I can't remember.
Yeah, because I was gonna say because Full Belly is in Katy Valley. It's probably one of the best known combo. They have both sheep and they are raising veggies, and I don't think they're doing fruit, but veggies. And so they're very well known in this area for both. And actually, they do make some yarn from their the wool that they raise. So I was just guessing that might be, but I'm sure that there are other people. But it's going to shearing and is one of the most incredible things if you get the opportunity. And that's how I actually met some of the farmers that I bought from when I was starting, and I still go to some shearings now to buy fleece directly from farmers. But it was a way for you to be able to pick out I want that fleece, and you would meet the sheep, and it really provides a wonderful connection to the farm, whoever's raising the sheep, whether it's like somebody like Robin Lined or other local farmers, and and then being able to hand pick which fleece you want to work with, because you're going to spend a lot of time working with that fleece. So it's really awesome to have that deep connection.
Yeah. Stephany, you want to talk about the sheep?
A little bit. I want to actually pick up on some of what Brooke is saying because it's so important. As Brooke was talking about, we're seeing now what Brooke mentioned at the beginning, which is that because of the pandemic and the necessary safety and not having people packed into factories where they process our fibers, is that wool prices are absolutely collapsed. They're so below zero and below that if you watch the wool market indices, so like the Australian markets or the US commodity numbers, they don't even have enough sales to make the index because the wool is not selling. So when I really, and I've got to shout out to some Oregon farms, Iron Water Ranch and Dark Side Shearing, which is Jake Valentine's amazing shearing company. He's really, really good, and he runs a couple of trailers all throughout Oregon shearing. And what they've done is really to innovate on this buying the fleece direct model because the prices are so much better. So, it's more labor intensive to buy a fleece, to process it the whole way, but it's much cheaper for you than if you bought that equivalent quantity of yarn, because one fleece makes a lot of yarn. Mm-hmm. And more than a sweater's worth for sure. Even my small Shetland fleeces that I shear on the places that I keep them, I end up with 27 bulky skeins out of 2 small Shetland fleeces. That's like an 80-pound sheep. So on a 150-pound merino with more wool density, that's a lot of fiber that you get for the money. So it's kind of this win-win where if you can raise the price that the farmer is getting on the raw wool, because they have to pay us to come, as Brooke said, which you feel bad about. You're like, I don't want you to have to pay me $4 to $6 a head in this market when you can't sell it necessarily. So it's really, it's labor intensive, but what Dark Side Shearing has done is that they started doing Facebook live feeds from the shearing floor. So you could see the fleece coming off the sheep, And then they would write on a little 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper the attributes, like the weight of the fleece, the breed, just quick little attributes about it. And people could buy that, could basically bid on that raw fleece that was literally coming off the shearing floor somewhere in Oregon. And it was a tremendously great model for everybody. So that fleece that maybe at a commodity auction would be, at best, this is pre-pandemic, $3 to $4 a pound on a really good, 19 to 23 micron clean fleece, would now get, maybe it would be $100 for the whole fleece or something. And so I really love seeing these innovative models that are kind of, riffing on what the food system has done, but there are some really creative shearers and folks, and it just makes such a difference to the bottom line.
Absolutely. Yeah. 2 years ago, the price of wool, so the sort of the backbone of my business is a Cormo wool that we purchase from Wyoming, and it's purchased from a family farm, even though it's huge. It can be a family farm and they can have thousands upon thousands of sheep. Whereas here in California, we tend to have much smaller farms, at least especially here in Napa, Sonoma, Marin counties. Our farms and ranches tend to be much, much, much smaller by, 1/100th of a size. And part of the reason why we buy the Cormo wool from there is because we can get the quantity we need and we can get, and it typically is cleaner than California fleeces. Which has to do with the land that the sheep are grazing on and what grows and when it grows and what, seeds it produces. So, and then there's a lot of benefit to me as a yarn maker to buy cleaner fleece, because I get a much higher yield per pound from those fleeces, in terms of it's a lot less that has to get washed out or has to get carded, combed out. And so that's why we buy sort of, my backbone yarn is from Wyoming instead of California. And still we're buying, maybe 100th of this clip, even though we're buying, typically in a year, 5,000 to 6,000 pounds of wool. And 2 years ago, the price doubled, which is really great for farmers. And it's hard when you're buying that wool. And so this year, it was interesting. It was a real sort of kind of a nail biter. So between the fact that I knew that I wasn't going to be going to events, and as time has gone on, I now know that I'm basically doing no in-person events this year, and who knows about next year, right? So, and thankfully my customers are showing up for me, and and I'm, like Weird Sisters, are placing orders. So thank goodness, because that continues to provide financial support. But additionally, the farm that we buy from had not sold or at least warehoused their wool with the wool broker that we use to facilitate us buying this small quantity of this much larger flock. And the reason why we use a wool broker is partially it's ease, because the farmer then doesn't have to deal with this, but also what the farmer wants to do is they want to sell their whole clip ideally. And so the wool broker, essentially, we pay him to peel off a few bales for us, and we pay a premium price for that, but it allows us to buy this smaller quantity of this much larger clip. And so when we contacted him this year, he was like, well, we don't have it warehoused here like we normally would, and apparently that was sort of consistent among the farmers in the area, is that they were so worried about the prices because they were watching it go down and down and down, that they were warehousing it closer to their ranch to see if they could wait out the prices going up. And so, again, part of the reason why we use a broker is that then he went and talked to them and, negotiated us being able to buy, the bales that we needed. And so thankfully we will be able to make yarn again this year. But there was a sort of moment of like, will they even release any to us? because of the fact that the prices are, and we're not paying like those super low prices, but we are paying less than we paid last year or the year before. So, it's sort of in this case, it is helpful for us because of the fact that, we definitely are making less this year. So it's nice to have that price break, but at the same time, you really want to see farmers making as much money per pound as possible too. So it's a tough year, and it really sort of exposes all of the different parts of the supply chain and some of the weaknesses and some of the stress points in it in terms of making decisions and access and people's willingness to sell even when the price is low. So it's been an interesting year so far in terms of that whole part of my business, and at least.
Well, and Stephany, you haven't been able to go out, right? You haven't been able to go out and shear.
I did, actually. I have to. So I struggled with this for a while. My season here is busy from basically January through July now. It starts to taper off at the end of June. And then I get, in the autumn, it's like some crutching, and that's where we just shear the belly and the crotch and under tail area of the ewes who will be lambing, so that they are cleaner and they have an easier labor and they heal faster and the lambs can nurse better. But there's not a ton of that going on. And as Brooke mentioned, a lot of my customers, my bread and butter of my business is the smaller holdings. Like California land at this point is just so divided. We don't really have if you go to the Dakotas or parts of Nevada, you'll have a ranch that's tens of thousands of acres, and we don't have many of those left here. It's just been subdivided and parceled off or made into housing. So the kind of backbone of my business, also so I don't just have to live on the road, 8 months of the year, is little flocks that graze fire risk. But I do go to rural communities, and I'm somebody who my house is in the south side of San Francisco. So when the pandemic started and we really didn't have a lot of information, but I kind of knew it was going to be bad. And I'm not saying that as like, I know more than you. The thing is that as shearers, the minute the shearing community heard it was zoonotic, that it passes from animals to people, we said, oh, whoa. Because those are whole other things. It's tetanus, it's rabies, some are bacterial and some are viral. Cassia lymphiditis we can get from sheep. So like in our daily lives, we are very aware of zoonotic viruses and bacteria and how we have to protect ourselves, Q fever, all these things. So when we heard it was zoonotic, period, we were like, oh, one of those. Right? Oh, crap. And so I knew I had to be super careful. So I canceled immediately. I was supposed to be in Montana for the week of March 9th. And I'm like, I'm not flying to Montana. I've been going on to different farms as it is. I did all of my March jobs through like March. I think I worked through like April 2nd or something. I don't quite remember. And then I basically took April trying to figure out what I was going to do for my protocol. So I moved all of the April jobs into May, which whiny personal thing. It's a lot hotter in California in May than it is in April. So I knew I was going to be paying for that by shearing in 90 degrees instead of 72, which for a full day is a whole different proposition. But so it goes. And I just had to figure out like, okay, what are we going to do? And online, the shearing community is very small and very tight. We have a Facebook group. We were all talking with each other about what we were doing. Like, are we staying in hotels? No, we are not. Are we camping in our cars all the time? Nobody's going to come out and talk to us. Like, so we've had to do all of the labor that we do where I was like, we're not having community sharing. We're not having potlucks. You're not feeding me any food. I'm not coming in your house. We're not having skirting where because I'm sweating. Sweat is like pouring off my nose when I'm working. Like my grossness is all over the stuff. So I didn't want anybody near me where my vapors and grossness is flying. Let those fleeces sit out in the sun and the fresh air. Immediately after I've gotten them, don't touch them unless you're going to use gloves. For a while, we thought that the virus lived on metal. It does live on metal for days, but outside it's a different thing. And I was just envisioning every ranch gate that I touch, that I go through, like just setting up my equipment. So I've been doing basically all the work that I normally have other people do. So nobody can catch my sheep for me. Nobody can flip the sheep for me. Nobody can hand them to me. Nobody can sweep the shearing floor. Nobody can skirt the fleeces. Like, I have to do everything for basically the same price because like the market's not good right now. So I just had to figure out what my protocol would be about when I was going to ask to wear masks, you know, contactless payment, how you're going to show me where the sheep are on the property. Can you leave out lines? We really had to all reconfigure what we were doing because the sheep do have to get sheared. And it's not the same as food. Like, we're not as essential as the grocery worker, but in terms of the animals and their continued health and they're continuing to have their healthy lambs, and, you know, we are thinking long term, like, we hope the pandemic ends at some point and those sheep are going to need to have their offspring and kind of keep carrying it on. So I did work. I basically took April off, and that's awful too, because then you come back in May and you're like, great, I haven't sheared in 3.5 weeks, and my body gets to start all over again. But I have been working. Yeah. I've just been doing it carefully because shearers were, from the beginning, we were ideally positioned to be super spreaders, bringing it from farm to farm to farm, going to a rural community with 300 people that has nobody else coming in. Like, I don't want to be the person that brought it. So that's my long-winded, like, how the season has kind of been. It's been hard.
Well, and I just wanted to point out, in terms of the amount of calories that sheep shearers use is equivalent to running a marathon. So every day of shearing is a marathon worth of calories that a sheep shearer is burning. So just to put that into perspective for people, you're not doing it in the time that people typically run a marathon. You're doing it over a full day of work, but still it's that level of expenditure of energy. So then adding in all of those additional steps that typically you have help with, just, you know, shoots up the amount of energy it takes. So I really feel for you, Stephany. I mean, it's no fun. I mean,
conversation is so great. This is so great because I'm like so spurred by like a million different questions I want to ask. I know Fuchsia has a question, but first, related to talking all about the pandemic stuff, are there ways that what can we do? And if we don't have to talk about it, but you could put links in the chat for ways that we can support the farmers and the wool dyers. Like, you know, is there a COVID grant for them, or what can we do to support those farms? And we don't have to talk about it. You could put it in the chat, but that was just one of the things that came to my mind. And then Fuchsia has a question as well.
I wanted to know if you could talk, Stephany, a little bit more about what the, you know, female sheep shearing culture is like. Like, if you have any pushback, if it's harder, or it's just more tight knit because you're a smaller community, or if really there's no, you know, just what's your perspective and your experience?
Yeah, I will say, for my part, I mean, the shearing community, I think it really is like any other community based on very deep interests. Like, only another shearer knows how hard it is. Like, no, if you have never done it, you can have no idea what it is like to like hold a 200-pound animal with your legs and have it kick you. Like, it has to happen to you. And so the level of real empathy that puts between you, and that we all kind of see each other's, like, we all know we're all crazy, really, for keeping doing this. Like, there's something not right about showing up over and over to get beaten up, you know, like it's just a special kind of person. And so there's this natural affinity that kind of supersedes everything else. And I think everybody's just shearers together are so supportive of each other. I mean across like gender, like the men in the shearing community have been so awesome. Like, because it's really just like anybody who's willing to do this, it's like you have a crew when you're on a bicycle racing team. It feels more like that, or like people you would train for a marathon with. That's kind of your people. I know other female shearers, and female shearers, by the way, we are like this. Those are my girls. We are constantly in touch, even though we're in different states, and we are super tight. there's a great Shed Mamas group on Facebook, which is like the female shearers and the wool classers and the wool handlers who have kids in the wool sheds and how they work out childcare. It's just it's a big family. Now, I will say, I know female shearers who have heard a few inappropriate remarks. I won't repeat them here. They're really gross. But then, you know, my whole thing is this. This is going to sound snotty. I don't mean it that way, but I do kind of mean it. The farmers need shearers more than shearers need them. There are not very many of us. So if you want somebody back at your ranch, you have no interest in not treating them well, because every shearer in the United States will know. We will finish that job. We will come onto the Shearers USA Facebook group and we'll say, like, nobody go here for him. He said this foul thing, or you can leave. You know, and I think that's the thing, is that you can leave. That is very rare. I mean, in 8 years of sharing, I have never had anyone say a thing to me. Like I say, tech offices were so much worse. The things that men routinely said to me at work when I worked in an office in San Francisco were so far and away, so much worse and so much grosser than anything I have seen working on my own. I think there's just a different respect and manners in ag communities as well, that in a good way. Yeah, it's been great. I feel it surprised me. I think we have a lot of, you know, I expected it to be worse. I'm not even sure why. Yeah, but, you know, it's just like, because you see these big cowboy men, and I guess people make assumptions about them, you know, for both ways. And a lot of people who hire me are women. So I also want to say, I think I'm kind of buffered from this, because I could just not be getting hired, like sample bias, by those kinds of folks.
Maybe
right?
in a sense you are helping those people that are hiring you, right? Because they feel like, oh, sister, I'm gonna
right.
you know, connect with them. So we have like a relevant question from Kathy P. She asks, or they ask, I'm curious if female sheep shearers generally do a better job, if knowing that the wool is going to be made in artistic fibers changes anything. She's thinking about second cuts, etc.
Yeah, that's just a skill level. So we have point of pride in craft, like anybody else. Like everybody calls shearing ag labor. Like, it is a very skilled craft that we are very proud of, that there's an internal motivation to do the absolute best. Like, if I make a second cut, I am mad at myself, because that's like, I'm not doing well enough with my skill. It means I have to get better. It's like an athlete kind of thing and a technique thing. So there's varying levels of skill, but I don't know if women make better shearers. I've heard from my instructors that because I certainly don't. I'm not a 200-pound muscular guy who grew up handling animals and has that long knowledge of people who have handled animals for a long time. You just learn a lot about animal handling. So, you know, I think the skill comes from time. It's really how long you've been shearing. Your first 100 sheep are the worst. The first 1,000 are the worst. And when you've sheared a few thousand sheep, you start to get pretty good at what you're doing. But it really takes a few thousand to be like, and you can still make second cuts sometimes if there's a rise in there. So what my instructor said, though, is that they think, they've seen a lot of classes come through, so at least at the beginning, they think men who are learning, who have the physical strength, rely more on that physical strength than the women who don't have just the raw, like men just tend to have more upper body power, you know, than we do, that we might do with finesse or weight shifting, you know, that instead of trying to just muscle the animal out of the gate. Now, you learn all that. You learn very quickly. It doesn't behoove you to fight with an animal. But that I've heard instructors that they see an initial different approach. But I think that all shearers really are, you know, there's a couple guys I think who are maybe rough, or crews that are rough, but I think they're not trained. Like, anytime I've seen a video of a rough shearing, I'm like, that person doesn't know how to stop the animal from kicking him or whatever. You know, it is a point of pride, like not having second cuts, not cutting the animal, keeping the fleece in one piece. That is my internal pressure on myself. You know, every 5 sheep, I try to do something better, and I pause and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? What do I need to do better? Too many second cuts, or or what have you. But it's a skill thing. We want to be the best, you know.
So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the dyeing part. So kind of after the sheep's been shorn and all of that. So
I'm having audio issues, so I apologize.
Can you hear us, Brooke? No. Sounds like Brooke cannot hear us.
Okay, then I'm going to ask Stephany for 1 second, if you would mind, just so people get an idea of like how tough it is. Would you mind if I read 2 paragraphs?
From raw materials.
From raw materials.
Go ahead. Can you hear us now, Brooke?
No.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Read it. Thank you. Yes, please. Thanks.
It's part of chapter 1, and you know, I'm not a great read aloud person, but this is, when I was reading this, I'm going to cry now. 10 minutes into the drive to my father-in-law's house, the sun sliding behind the western hills. I can't read it, never mind. It's so powerful. Like how hard that was for you.
Maybe just like summarize that part of the book so people know.
You want me to read it? I can read it.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, you're so sweet, by the way. I actually feel sorry for making people cry, but I was definitely crying.
I'm a cry anyway.
Yeah, we see. Yeah. And this is how it is kind of all the time still with you. Now it takes me more sheep to feel that tired, but it still happens. All right. 2 paragraphs. Okay. This is after my 3rd day of sharing school for folks who haven't read the book. I got beaten up really badly by a sheep. 10 minutes into the drive to my father-in-law's house, the sun sliding behind the western hills, I admit I have no business operating a motor vehicle. My arms cannot control the steering wheel at 65 miles an hour, driven by right lane standards on California Highway 101. My mouth actually waters at the first sight of a Coca-Cola billboard, which I didn't know was possible. I need sugar. I cannot go into a restaurant. I reek of manure. My heavy brown work pants are soaked with so much lanolin that I look like I'm wearing chaps. Stray bits of wool and straw are plastered to my arms and chest, shellacked in place by dried sweat. Bruises cover my forearms, neck, chest, and chin, and my bottom lip is thinly split. And that is pretty typical. Is that what you were thinking, that part?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, can you see my bruise? I have some bruises here, but I think they're not. There's a one. Yeah. Kind of faded.
So while we're waiting for Brooke, and hopefully she'll be able to reconnect because we have some really great questions about dyeing. There's another question for you, Stephany. As a sheep shearer, do you have favorite breeds to work with, either because of the texture of the fleece or the personalities of the sheep themselves?
Yes, I do. I like what I call normal size sheep. My favorite ones are not too heavy because they're so hard on it. Like the difference between shearing 120 pounds and 280 pounds is a lot. I like Targhee and Corriedale. Anything that's not where it gets difficult for me is those meat sheep crosses. So like Hampshires, Hamps and Suffolks are big frame sheep. They're for the meat industry. Once they're not yearlings are pretty scully, no matter the breed. They're kind of nuts. They've never been sheared before. They're super young. They're like wild teenagers. They're just harder to handle. They have long legs and they can kick a lot. So I really like just about any breed. I love shearing Shetlands because they tend to be like 80 to 100 pounds. So if I'm going to have a big day, it's on a sheep of that weight. And what we call, a lot of folks think that one of the first things I heard about when the book is like this label primitive, like, oh, Stephany, you can't say primitive breed sheep. That's super racist. And I'm like, no, it's the best kind of sheep. It means they're super smart. It means we haven't messed with them too much. It means they're great. They tend to be great mothers. They tend to like lamb on pasture. They're strong. They're intelligent. They're wily. And so while they might be harder to handle, like they tend to have great body condition. And I just really like sharing them. These are like your Navajo churro, your Jacob, your Icelandics. They have beautiful fiber. They're not super wrinkly. And I really enjoy them.
Unfortunately, they're not as popular in terms of people knitting. So
is that because
people worry about the crunchiness factor, and because, you know, the softer it is, the more interested people are in knitting it generally. So, but if you can get if you can get your hands on some of those fibers and try it out for yourself, especially for outerwear garments, they're great. They last really long, and they just get nicer with wear. So don't be biased against those, crunchier fibers.
Yeah, they're gonna longer.
Sorry about my technical issues. I swear, it's probably the aliens passing overhead. I don't know.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, I want to talk to you.
I wanted to just answer your original question, the one about how you can help, just very quickly, because this is just broader. This is just a broader comment in terms of our industry, is that in general, like, there are not a lot of huge businesses in our industry. And so by making a purchase, you are very much supporting people. Every purchase that, you make from a store, every purchase that you make from a dyer, every purchase you make from a designer, it has an incredible amount of impact. Even if it's a small purchase, it all adds up. And so, I very much encourage people to vote with their dollars. And that's probably the fastest, most direct way to help people, is to, figure out whatever's in your budget and make a purchase. And if you don't, then help them with marketing. Word of mouth, recommends stuff to your friends. If you go to a knitting or crocheting or crafting group, tell them about Stephany's book. Tell them about Weird Sisters Yarn Store. Tell them about my yarn. Tell them, that kind of marketing is incredibly helpful. Things like, Instagram and Facebook, liking posts, commenting on posts, it absolutely makes a difference. As simple as that seems, you can absolutely help people, the companies that you want to support, by liking, commenting, and resharing. It's the reason why people constantly sort of say that. And then the other way is signing up for newsletters and then reading them, because that, first of all, I don't know about other companies, but I tend to save really good information for my newsletter subscribers, and they oftentimes will hear about things first, they get deals, but it's just a way for me to be able to stay connected with my customers. And, I write a monthly blog post, and so I always alert people when I post a new blog post and stuff like that. So there's, those are things that you can do that cost you no money, that absolutely support, whatever producer it is that you want to support. So I highly recommend those kinds of things. So that's my general answer that I give, even in times that are not pandemic crazy times like now.
Are you able to hear us, Brooke?
I also noticed in the chat that there was a question about if there's any colors that you can't make with natural dyes. And just quickly, I would say that neons, except for neon yellow, but neons or fluorescent neons are hard, except for neon yellow. Like I said, you can make that from weld. And then black, a true black, is really hard. And there's some clarity. There's just not the clarity of color that you get with the synthetic dyes, because synthetic dyes, what you can do is you can buy cyan, magenta, yellow, and you can then mix those to get different colors. And then you can also buy like proprietary blends where they'll say, like, I don't know, pea shoot green or whatever. And that, that allows you to buy, make that color, but they've already pre-mixed it. With natural dyes, plants have a mix of dyes dye components in them already. Some plants have more dye components than others. And so it's like you're working with pre-mixed colors. And so then when you go to then add them together, you're adding even more dye components together. So it's always, that's why that's why natural dyes tends to be a little bit more muted in terms of its palette. I call it incredibly friendly. And it tends to be, natural dyes produce colors that are very wearable. Synthetic dyes were developed in 1860s, and so they're relatively new in terms of humans. And so we as humans were used to natural dyes, and sort of collectively, historically, that that natural dyes traditionally sort of create very sort of calm colors and very wearable. They're really easy if you want to mix colors together, because there's just not that clashing that you can sometimes have happen with synthetic dyes, because they're already kind of mixed colors. So I just happened to, I thought I would answer that. Well, since I was looking in the chat and telling you I was having audio problems, I figured I'd take my opportunity to answer that question. And go ahead, Stephany.
Yeah, I wanted to show, because I'm swatching your yarn. So sorry, I have to brag on you a bit here. Because I'm swatching awesome. For the Novelli sweater.
Oh, that's going to be really pretty.
And these two, color work at the bottom. And it's a short sleeve sweater from Boyland Knitworks. So I was swatching for my color work and for this. And it's all out of your Cormo worsted, I think, in 3 different colors, and it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Thanks for this.
That's really cool. I really like that pattern. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
I really like that stranded pattern. That's really neat.
Thanks. Yeah, I was deciding what would be the outside and inside color,
Always.
But the top of this is a lot like the sweater you have on. The knit pattern.
Oh. I'll have to look it up, because I'm familiar with some of her patterns, but not necessarily all of them. So I'll have to look I think I know which one it is, though. But yeah, I love doing color work because it's so fun to play with the different colors. So yeah, I'm excited to see it. I don't know if there are any other questions.
Yeah, there are a couple more. So I'm just kind of
that I missed.
Filter through these because you can vote. So when people ask questions, people can vote on the ones they want to hear.
Stephany, what are you wearing?
I am wearing the Cardigan by Denise Bayron of Bayron Handmade is the pattern. She's local to me. And then the yarn is undyed merino from Sally Fox. It's her Elderlana. So
fun.
Folks who are not, everybody's got different value chains, I say. So Sally doesn't butcher her sheep. She lets the ewes live out their full natural lives producing fiber on her farm. So these are 2 of her colored merinos. And this is the cool thing about sheep that are not just white, is that the colors change over time, kind of like we get gray hair, we get lighter hair. The sheep fibers actually change color over the course of their 10 to 14 year average lifespan. So this is just naturally colored merino in the Cardigan. And Gina Clemens, who I shear for, sent me this as a surprise, a shawl pin. It's super cozy.
Nice.
However, I love it. It's just like a wrap. It could replace like any robe. I was thinking of doing a robe length one. So super cozy. Thank you.
So basically it's like a wearable blanket if you made a robe length one. The one thing I was going to say is, because I buy year after year from certain farmers, because I have roving made. And so I'm often buying from the same sheep every year. And so it's really fun to get to know the different sheep and see how their color develops over time, because like you said, it's not the same year over year. And so the funny thing is I also have customers who are looking for wool from the same sheep. And so I have a customer who's was waiting for me to get the roving back from Irene, the sheep, which just came back because I have that made from at Morro Bay, so here in California, because Sherry does a fabulous job. And so, but the funny thing is that, so this is Merino Cross from Peggy Agnew, Red Creek Farms in Potter Valley. And so when I was saying, because of COVID, we're not seeing each other. So I wrote her an email and I asked her to just go ahead and send the wool directly to the mill, because there was really no reason, because I knew that Peggy had done a fabulous job skirting. I wasn't worried about any of that. So she just wrote me a note and she's like, Irene's, lighter this year as she's getting older. It was really sweet. And so anyway, so hopefully my customer is going to be okay with the fact, it's how it goes. Sheep get lighter as they get older.
Yeah. And it's funny because I didn't think about this aspect of my job at all, but I now have customers that I've sheared for like 7 years, which means some of the sheep are dying. And I had my first one this year, and it was the biggest, it was a huge sheep. His name was Jupiter. He was massive. He had to be, borderline 300 pounds, just a big old, probably a Romney Suffolk something. But the calmest sheep, like once you got him down, he just laid there. I did not have to even, he just lay on his side while I sheared him. I didn't even have to hold him down. He was the sweetest guy. And when I went to schedule, I'm like, hey, here's your date. Do you want your date this year? Which is what I tell my customers. And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, it's for how many? Let me know how many you have. I have down that you have so-and-so. And they're like, it won't be that many because he died. And I was like, I was crying on the sofa about this dead sheep that I sheared every year. And you're like, and people's kids get bigger. Like now their kids that were little babies are like in 3rd grade. And I'm like, oh, it's such an interesting way to, like, when you're just there once a year and you see that snapshot as a shearer, you really sense the passage of time with the animals, with the kids. It's really something with the farm.
Absolutely. Yeah, my son is 11. He's 11 and a half. So I took him, he was born at the end of December, and I took him to Stitches West as a 2-month-old. So my mom came with me to help me out. So they're vendors who have known my son his whole life, and they always ask him, but because now he doesn't come with me because he's in school and all that sort of stuff. But, they're always like, oh, how is it? I'm like, huge. But, it's funny. This is, like I said, this is a relatively small industry, even though, apparently we have more, there are sort of, just speaking about knitters, don't want to exclude crocheters, but there are more knitters than there are golfers. And yet, we are still a small industry. We know each other. And so it's amazing how we get to know other people and get that close, but also, the animals that we work with and by the fleece. It makes it really special.
I want you guys to be our besties now. Like I feel so connected to everything that you're doing, and I don't knit, so I guess I better learn. Brooke, we have a question in the chat because we weren't sure you could hear us, so we put it in the chat. Can you hear us? I don't think Brooke can hear us.
Stephany, can you hear us?
So I can't hear you, but I could hear Stephany.
Okay. There's a question.
Oh, nope. Now I can't hear you either. There we go. Go ahead.
Can you hear? Yeah. Okay. The question is, I think it's the one. Do you have any advice or suggestions on dyeing with dyer's coreopsis? We'll have to see if this is whole coreopsis or an extract. I'm currently dyeing hand-spun Rambouillet yarn with dried flowers. Okay, there it is. And the color is a muddy mustard color. Does changing pH of dye water have any effect? Thank you.
So the first thing that I'll say is that the funny thing about natural dyes is that you have this sort of spin-off thing of that you really get to know your own water. And I know that doesn't sound very exciting, but it's so important. And so if you have like iron contamination in your water, it's amazing how much it affects the color that you're going to get. And then there are other minerals that you can have in your water that also will cause problems. Like here, I have to buy water to do all my indigo dyeing. If I don't, then I don't get very good indigo colors. And obviously that's a really important dye because that's what gives us blue. So in terms of the muddy sort of yellow, you might, if it's a small enough quantity and you're willing to do it the shortcut is just to go out and, buy some filtered water, get some distilled water, try that. And the other thing is, you didn't mention whether or not you've scoured and mordanted your yarn, because that's a really important, again, not super sexy, but really important part of natural dyeing. And so what you want to do is you want to soak your yarn in really hot water. And I use a little bit of dish soap. I tend to use something that doesn't have any dyes or fragrance, like 7th generation. And I just leave it in there for like at least 10 to 15 minutes. It kind of depends on how processed the yarn is. Things that are superwash, that are more processed, tend to not need as much soaking as what are sometimes called farm yarns. So depending on what mill they're coming from, they may be sort of scoured, washed more vigorously than others. So, and you'll be able to tell because you'll see what color the water is.
Brooke, she says she scoured and mordanted the yarn with alum.
Okay, great. So if those are the best places, like you're going to get the best colors by doing those 2 steps first, obviously. So if you've done those 2 steps, great. Then the next thing I would try is just use distilled water, because that just, rather than fussing with your water, do that, because generally it's also pH neutral, and see what color you're getting. But I will say that if you feel up to it, upping the alkalinity a little bit can be really helpful with yellows. It can help it brighten it a little bit. You don't want to do it too much because wool prefers an acid environment, but just that little bit. Sometimes what I'll do is so essentially what you're making is tea when you're using a dried flower, is that you can do it in that extraction point. You can just add, I have lye on hand because I'm using that for my my indigo pot. It's a very strong, it's pretty strong in terms of the alkalinity. You want to just use a very small quantity. So oftentimes people use soda ash, which is a little bit gentler. But again, I would start with a small quantity if you don't have pH strips on hand to be checking to make sure that you haven't accidentally gone super crazy. Like you wouldn't want to go, like neutral is, 6, 7. So, I wouldn't go above between 8 and 9, depending on, how accurate your strips are. But that would be my tip, is if the distilled color, if the distilled water isn't giving you the color that you want, then I would try just upping the alkalinity a little bit and see if you can just get a little bit more of that golden yellow color out. Sometimes it also has to do with what part of the plant you're using. If you're just popping the heads off the plant, which sounds kind of funny, sometimes that can help give you a slightly clearer color than if you're using all of maybe the more of the plant. Sometimes that can muddy the color a little bit too, but that kind of varies by plant, and not necessarily the case with dyer's coreopsis. So yeah, I would go, my 2 main suggestions then are distilled water and upping the pH a little bit.
Great. So Brooke, I don't think you can hear us, but something I learned about Brooke today is that she's very good at reading lips. So I'm hoping she can still see what I'm saying. But we're kind of at the end of the hour. So we just wanted to wrap up, start by just saying thank you so much to both of you, Brooke and Stephany, for joining us last minute in these crazy times. We are so excited for the day we get to all be together in person. I think that'll just be a really great day that I'm looking forward to. And thank you so much for everyone that is here and logged in with us. We just really appreciate you kind of experimenting with us in all these new virtual ways. We have the book, Raw Material, that's Stephany Wilkes' book. We have available 6 signed copies. If you want to purchase the book, you can buy it on tworiversbooks.com. And then Brooke's yarn is Sincere Sheep. You can buy on her website, Sincere Sheep. The link is in the chat. I will not misspeak it because I might I'm not sure if it's Sincere Sheep or Sincere Sheep Yarn. But we are also ordering her yarns. So they will be coming into Weird Sisters shortly. I just placed the order, but as attendants of this event, we're going to send you an email with a link so that you can access for pre-orders there. And so you can purchase Sincere Sheep yarns from us, pre-order for pickup or shipping.
And lastly, we're launching a Patreon campaign. So that will be coming soon as well. More details to follow on that. I don't want to keep everybody much longer. Yeah, I'm so excited about this event that it's recorded. So you can still share it and send it to friends. They'll just come back here and they'll see the recording. So any last words from you guys?
No, I can't wait to visit y'all.
Yeah.
Look out, next time I'm in Portland, I'm just gonna be in there knitting.
That's totally fine.
Thank you so much. Thanks for doing what you do.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yay. Bye. Oh.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.